This is the new SEC.
Welcome to the new SEC podcast. I'm Randall Ledet Jr. We got Hunter Zeisman here. This is our Week 11 preview episode. If you've been rocking with us, we appreciate you. This is episode 22 of the new SEC podcast. This episode, we're going to give you previews of all the top games in the SEC and talk about some of the top games around the country as well and what it means for the upcoming CFP rankings. We're recording here Monday night, and the CFP rankings are coming out on Tuesday. And so, Hunter, what are the feelings? First week of November football's happened. We're coming to our second week of November football. How are we feeling?
This is a week I was waiting for, a week that was circled. Two games in particular, Georgia, Ole Miss, Alabama, LSU. I've been waiting for it. A third game kind of slipped in that I didn't even know I needed in that South Carolina Vanderbilt. That one now means a lot. I think come Tuesday, both teams, in my opinion, find themselves in the rankings. So it's a huge week for football. I mean, it's a huge week for the SEC. 6 games, like you mentioned. We got a lot to talk about. I'm pumped.
Oh, yeah, definitely a lot to talk about. I'm super pumped. I'm glad you're pumped. This is a great slate. Bama LSU feels like in a playoff elimination game potentially. Georgia Ole Miss could be a playoff elimination game potentially, depending on if Ole Miss wins or even if Georgia wins and Ole Miss loses. That could be a potential elimination game for the playoffs. Oklahoma, Missouri, Big 12 rivalry restored here. And then, we get to see Tennessee take on another opponent in Mississippi State. Florida versus Texas, this game could have been extra special. DJ Lagway coming back home to Texas, but we will be seeing Aiden and Warner most likely play in this game. And so we got a good week of college football. Hunter, man, what are some other things you're thinking about for this week?
I think there's a couple other games too, like when we're looking outside of the SEC, we'll talk about it in the Around the Country segment, but, BYU playing this week, I think that one's going to be really important. Really the playoff rankings is really the thing I'm excited for this week. Come Saturday when these games are being played and we start kind of getting the picture of what teams are going to play out. You mentioned the elimination game with Alabama, LSU, and then Georgia and Ole Miss. The results of these games are going to be talked about in that boardroom for the rest of the season. I think, you can't, no matter who wins this game, the loser of this game, it's going to be a resume builder or a breakdown for either team. You can't really come back from the results of this week late in the season.
Yeah, you definitely can't come back from the results late in the season. And the rankings are extra special with those 12 spots. Like you talked about BYU playing in the Holy War, BYU versus Utah. That's going to be, a lot of hate there, more than people realize. But the rankings are definitely the star of this week. Like, what does the committee value? I feel like every year it's a different vibe in terms of, strength of wins, margin of victory, just when you lost your games, like whether you lost early in the season, whether you lost late, how you lost. Sometimes there's quality losses taken into the picture, which I think may happen with the SEC given the type of schedules they're playing compared to other conferences. And so the rankings are going to be really fun when they come out. And so, looking forward to that.
Yeah. Quality losses are going to be a thing for sure. When you look at Georgia, where they're sitting in it with their quality loss to an Alabama team, if you're looking at Alabama, seeing where Vanderbilt ends up in all of this is going to be important. Seeing where Tennessee ends up in all of this is important. It's a round robin in the SEC of teams beating up on each other. So like the chart of this team beat this team, the transitive property chart is crazy this year. So they all have a stake in a shot at. Vanderbilt's not eliminated from the SEC championship game right now. It's crazy.
It is really crazy. This year with the lack of divisions, it feels like there's more teams in it than ever. A lot of teams sitting at that 1-loss spot. A lot of teams sitting at the 2-loss spot. Even outside the conference, it's like, how high is the committee going to put an undefeated BYU? How high is the committee going to put an undefeated Indiana? Obviously, those teams don't have the Michigan next to their helmet or the Ohio State or some of the other bigger brands, but they are undefeated playing, the schedule that they have in front of them. So it'd be interesting to see kind of where they place those teams as well. Moving on to our first preview of the week, we got Florida taking on Texas. Florida's going down to Texas, Austin, Texas. Should be a really exciting one. Looking forward to seeing, how Texas continues to build on that win they had against Vanderbilt this past week. And so, or 2 weeks ago, correction. And, for Florida, obviously tough loss to Georgia. Newer team coming out here with Aiden Warner, for this game, 21.5 point spread. So Vegas thinks that Texas will take care of business, but what do we think here at the new SEC podcast?
I think, we got to take everything into consideration, and the quarterback situation being the biggest piece of that. I will say in Florida's defense, with what Aiden Warner came in the game and did, he wasn't practicing as a QB1. He's been QB3 on the roster, walk-on transfer from Yale. We don't know necessarily what his ceiling is, what he can come out and do. I don't think it will be pretty. I don't think it will be a drastically improved performance for him from last week. But getting a week of practice in, getting prepared for a team, should Lagway be unable to go in this game, which is likely, he may be able to do something. I think the piece in this is that they're kind of playing with house money. Build confidence, let him take some shots. You don't have the arm that Lagway had in the downfield threat, but right now they may show something interesting that could shake up the game because they have nothing to lose.
Yeah, they definitely could show something really interesting. And I think a key for this game is going to be building on the running game, right? Taking advantage of what Jaden Ball brings to the table. Hopefully you see Montrell Johnson comes back in this game as well. Obviously he played pretty well against Tennessee a couple of weeks back. This Texas defense is not going to make it really easy for them from a rushing defense perspective. They're sitting at, top 3 in the SEC, giving up around 135 yards a game on the ground. But I think this will be a key for Florida when you have a young quarterback who's only played in one game, and this will be his first official start at the SEC level.
Yeah. Texas right now giving up around 3.1 yards per carry to opposing running backs, like 5th in the SEC. You mentioned that piece there, and it depends. Will Florida be able to get the running game going here, or will they have to lean on the quarterback? I think they're going to come out with something a little bit split. Like I don't think this is one of those quarterback injury situations where they're going to come in and just pound the rock because they don't trust this guy. Like we saw them in that game. They're tight game, and they were still having him out there throwing the ball a little bit. Like, There's some confidence to it. It's confidence with a grain of salt because of, his inexperience as a starting quarterback, his age, and kind of the prestige of, but he walked onto a Florida team. He was a walk-on transfer. Like the guy's got something. It's not a QB1 potential, but he has something. So talking positively on Florida, Florida defensively, I think on the other hand, can keep them in a game. Like Florida defensively is improved in insane amount from week 1 against Miami.
Yes. And that was kind of where I've been touching on just where Billy Napier stands in the season. The team has looked significantly better since Miami. They've looked significantly better since that game at home against Texas A&M. This defense could certainly give some trouble to Quinn Ewers, who's had some turnover challenges this season. I think, roughly 4 to 6 in the last couple of games, interception wise. If Florida's able to create some turnovers, that's going to be critical for them to have a chance to stay in this game. And then for Texas, limiting the turnovers will be key. Getting ahead early. We didn't fully see that against Vanderbilt, but they had good game control. If they have that game control, they'll be fine. But getting ahead early for them and, having Aiden Warner play from behind is a lot different than having his confidence ahead and then being ahead in the game.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And the turnover battle is going to be huge in this one. If, taking the first few drives of the Oklahoma game that Texas was in, you take the UGA game last week versus Vandy, the 2 picks that Ewers had in that one against a not stingy Vanderbilt defense. Right now, Florida, if you're just taking the last 3 games, looking at recency, they're first in the country in interceptions per game. Mm-hmm. They're getting turnovers, and that's Tennessee, Kentucky, and Georgia that they're getting those picks against. Now, Tennessee and Kentucky, we know the problems there. We know the problems with Georgia, but these are big marquee matchups. So I expect Florida's defense to show up. Where I see concern in this game for Florida is should the offense not get going, you're going to see the Florida defense on the field often. They may get a turnover here and there. They may force some short possessions from Texas, but Texas, I think, will have lots of reps on offense because although I think that Florida could show something, I think that everything is yet to be determined. I think that more often than not, Florida could find themselves punting the ball in this game.
Yep. And that's what we saw, right? It was really tough for them to convert on 3rd downs last game. A lot of stalled drives. If there's short drives, the defense is on the field a lot, like you mentioned. Eventually, that bend but don't break defense is going to break. And with the weapons that Texas has, they can afford to turn the ball over a couple times, but still have the opportunity to get Gunnar Helm involved and get a touchdown from him as a tight end, or get Ryan Wingo involved in the game and get some of these other guys like Matthew Golden as well on their side. That's what poses some challenges. But you mentioned and you talked about the interceptions and what they've been able to do in terms of turnovers. What do you think are the keys for Texas in this game that we maybe haven't already touched on?
Yeah, I think I want to see them be efficient. The offense to start fast. Don't turn over the ball. Don't play around. Play the style of offense with the players that you have. The running game has been spotty at times in getting it really going. It's tough to say an ideal key for this game, but with Texas's pieces that they have, that they could put a complete game together on the field, and this would be the one to do it because you
Yep.
want to build that momentum for Arkansas, Kentucky, and Texas A&M coming up. If you play your game, you will find yourself in the winner's seat for this. For Florida, we don't know anything about Warner. We know a little bit from last week against Georgia. Show something interesting. Come out, hopefully practice this week. They put a package together. They have some playmakers on offense. Maybe there's something that we don't know about.
Yep. There could be, right? And I think that something is coming from the running game and be coming from Elijah Badger potentially. What would Texas have to do to make people feel extra confident they're national championship contenders? I know we did a segment on it. This is another great litmus test for them to prove that. How impressive would they have to look with the 24-point spread? And do you think they hit it?
Yeah, I would want to see. I think the thing that shows the national championship contender status from them is the quarterback play and confidence in the pocket. Finding the receivers, they have weapons. Find the receivers, sit in the pocket, make the right decisions. If you see a Quinn Ewers, you want to leave this game with fans not questioning if Manning should go in. I think those fans are wrong that say that at this point in the season, but there are people that do it. You want to silence that.
Yeah,
that is what I want to see from this team, and it comes from the quarterback position.
And I felt the exact same way, right? It still kind of feels like there's this upside of what could be behind him, but what Quinn's upside truly is. And we know we're seeing a good Quinn. We're not seeing a great Quinn. We're seeing a good Quinn. And it's, if you see a great Quinn Ewers, you dispel those concerns about putting in, Manning. It makes it a much better game for them. I like Texas in this game by 2 touchdowns. I'm going to say 35-21.
Okay. All right. I think Texas gets it done 30-10. I think it's sitting right there around the spread. I'm going to stay away from it. It'll be interesting to see what this Florida offense can do. Texas, I think, may have trouble scoring in just a exceptional volume to cover the spread. So it could be a good game. It could be a better one than maybe we expect.
We have South Carolina taking on Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt right now in the AP is number 24. CFP rankings come out on Tuesday. 3.5-point spread. This game is taking place in Nashville, if I'm not mistaken. And so, what are the feelings for Vandy, who's currently bowling, South Carolina looking to be able to be bowling? If they win this game, they're going bowling. That man Beamer going to play in a bowl game. What are the feelings for this game?
It's a feeling of momentum on both sides, right? Vanderbilt feels like they were doubted coming into this year, like most people were. They're overperforming to expectations. They're pumped. I mean, South Carolina, the locker room after the game, the morale is insanely high after an absolute beatdown against A&M last week. It's both teams that I feel like you can't really, it's tough to pick against because South Carolina looking extremely dominant in games and the defense looks unstoppable. Vanderbilt capturing lightning in a bottle where it's like, when will the magic run out? It's tough because you have two teams just with such high momentum.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Vanderbilt did a really good job of locking up, Peyton Thorne and Keandre Lambert-Smith last week against Auburn. I think for this game, they're going to have, it's obvious, but they're going to have a much more, heavier challenge with this rushing attack compared to what Auburn is able to offer on the ground and in the air. South Carolina has a similar archetype to A&M where they double down on the run. And we saw that on Saturday, 2 touchdowns from Sanders, 2 touchdowns from Norris. Or Lenore Sellers. This Vanderbilt defense, they're going to kind of have to face a piece of their own medicine in that rushing attack.
Yeah, and it depends on who shows up from South Carolina because Texas A&M didn't get the Lenore Sellers who throws the ball off his own helmet for a fumble. They got the guy who breaks 12 tackles and you can't catch him. You can't catch him behind the line. Like
he ain't falling backwards. He's going to fall forward.
That's right.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy was unstoppable when it comes to bringing him down. Strong. Is a strong guy in Raheem Sanders in same vein. You can't bring these guys down. Now, who shows up in this game? Because South Carolina showed different faces throughout the season. The turnover heavy South Carolina didn't show up last week. We saw it happen on the field, but it wasn't the ugly turnovers like we saw that took them out of the didn't take them out of the game against Alabama. But we saw some things that just from they could have won that game had it not gone that way. So It depends on what side Vandy gets, but they are run heavy in their own right.
Yeah, they definitely are. And, right now, of course, we've a lot of the stories went on to get Diego Pavia, what he's been able to do for this team, the leadership he's brought to that locker room, and what you see on the field. What would you say are the keys for Vanderbilt's offense to be able to, go at this South Carolina defense? You love this South Carolina defense.
I do. I
So,
do.
like, what do you think Vanderbilt has to do, and how do you expect South Carolina's defense to perform?
It'll be interesting because what Vanderbilt likes to do is get outside the pocket. South Carolina is going to be extremely they're going to do very, very well at setting the edge. Dylan Stewart, Kyle Kennard, they're going to set the edge. They're going to make it tough for Pavia to play his style of football. The DBs in South Carolina are doing well. Fortune, Kilgore, my guy, Imanwari, like playing well. And it's all about when Vanderbilt wins games, it's when eyes focus on Pavia and they miss their mark. So for Vanderbilt, can you continue to have that? Will South Carolina's DBs trust the front? Will they trust the guys to make the plays where they don't need to make that and they can keep their eyes on their guy?
Yep.
Or are they going to take their eyes off the ball, let their guys get open? I think that's the key for Vanderbilt in this game against the South Carolina defense is get guys out of position. I mentioned it in previous games for Vanderbilt. When you get outside the pocket, you throw guys out of position. I think South Carolina, though, has guys that they're tenured. South Carolina is one of the most tenured teams in college football.
Yep. And look, and they definitely have that veteran presence. You see it. I think on the offensive side for Vanderbilt, we need to see more from Cedric Alexander in this game. We need to see more from AJ Newberry, both the running back position. That rushing attack is what allows Pavia to build in the air. For them against South Carolina, for Vanderbilt, I would say it's really limiting big plays. Like we talked about that rushing attack, but we saw some really big runs from Raheem Sanders in this game that got a lot of momentum built for them. If you make them earn every yard and kind of like slow these drives down, that's where more opportunities present themselves for turnovers. That's where they find themselves fumbling the ball, find themselves turning over the ball. I think if they can prevent bigger plays from happening, that gives them the game control back, and it allows for Vanderbilt to do what they do best, which is hold the ball, manage the clock, and they're one of the better teams in the country right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, Vanderbilt, if you can force turnovers here, we know that they're prone to doing it. It's just forcing. I think each team would like to force the other to play traditional football, like sit in the pocket and throw the ball. If whichever team can force the other to do that and take them out of their element, South Carolina, I think, is going to be more proficient at that game if it gets to that. It's interesting, though, for running backs for Vanderbilt, Alexander, I think, was a little bit banged up going into Auburn, but it showed if you can one-dimensionalize this Vanderbilt team and force it to be a Pavia running and throwing the ball, I think South Carolina looks good in this one. Right now, the defense it was too dominant last week.
Yep.
And the offense played too well for me to say anything against this Gamecocks team.
I completely understand that, right? And I feel like what I love about this game the most is that both of these teams have played really close games and found a way to win. Both of these teams have had games where they've dominated as well, right? So it doesn't feel like their performances have been an anomaly. There's a pattern here. South Carolina's played close games like LSU but lost, but they've also played close games with other teams and won, right? Vanderbilt's in the same vein. In this one, I'm rolling with the Commodores.
Okay.
I like them 28-17. I think that they find a way to make the key stops. It will be close, but I like the Commodores in this one.
Okay. All right. I'm on the flip side. I like South Carolina. I think 30-16. I think that they cover. I think that they look strong, especially in the red zone and down the field. I think that they force Vanderbilt into a couple of field goals. The point total in this game at 45.5. While I'm close to that on the over, I do think that the game could go exceptionally over this, even though they do have good defenses on South Carolina. Right now, I think that this game could exceed the 45.5.
Yeah, it's definitely a possibility, right? And so it should be a fun one. Hunter has South Carolina. I got the Commodores. Either way, one of these teams will find themselves continuing to win. Another team might be bowling. Next game, the game, Alabama versus LSU, Death Valley, 7:30 p.m. Eastern. For all the marbles,
Yeah.
SEC West throwback right here. Alabama has won 3 of the last 4 of this series. What was the series record? I think over 10 plus games.
Yeah, 2 of the last 13 have gone LSU's way. So Alabama has shown that they win this game. Now this is a different Alabama team. We've seen it, like losing to Vanderbilt, they lose to Tennessee. as of, the last Tennessee game, that hadn't happened that frequently either. These teams don't usually find themselves at 6-2 at this point in the season. So it's tough to say what this game will look like, but playoff hopes are on the line. The team that loses this game finds themselves 3 losses, and they're looking at the Tax Slayer Bowl or worse.
The Birmingham Bowl, right?
Yeah.
Going on right there in Alabama. And for this game, it's going to be a star-studded matchup. Everybody talks about the top quarterbacks: Garrett Nussmeier, Jalen Milroe. What are you expecting to see from these two guys?
Yeah, I think if you're putting an offense above the other right now, I think they're going to operate differently. I think right now LSU will be throwing the ball a lot. I think that they're going to go for big plays. They're exceptional at big plays. Alabama's defense is horribly inept when it comes to big plays, at giving up big plays. So I think that LSU will be looking to attack that. The other side, I think that Alabama will be playing a different style of ball. I think that offensively with Milroe, they realized last week that they're a better team when they're run heavy.
Mm-hmm.
They got guys. They got Jam Miller. They got Justice Haynes, and they're about to play like Marshawn Lynch. Run through a face.
Okay,
run
right.
through a guy's face. I mean, we saw it last week.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I think they're gonna keep the ball on the ground. So I think we see two offenses that operate extremely differently. If I'm putting one against the other, in terms and context of the way the defenses will play, I like Alabama's offense to outperform LSU's offense in this game.
Okay, that's interesting. When I think about this game, you talked about it earlier, where LSU's going to pass the ball a lot, right? Typically Garrett Nussmeier is passing the ball like over 40 times a game. He's top 3 in the SEC for passing attempts. So the stats match what we're saying is going to happen on the field. Alabama's defense, we've talked about it, has kind of left a lot of these DBs on a lone island. And LSU's offense, for the most part of the season, they're scoring over 28 points a game. And so I think in the shootout, it kind of favors LSU in my mind a little bit because, from what we've seen from Nussmeier, if he's able to limit his turnover challenges, the top quarterbacks in the SEC across the board are turning the ball over. You're right. Beck, Nussmeier, et cetera. But I think even Milroe's got 6 of those interceptions as well. But, for this game, Nussmeier has proven that he can, stretch the field, get touchdowns with Kyron Lacey. He's been needed given just some of the inconsistencies in the rushing game with Durham, a true freshman. So I like Nussmeier to show out in this game against this defense. Is it going to be enough? I'm not saying yes or no yet, but I do like him to show out and be able to score and go back and forth in this team. We've seen just about every quarterback do that on Bama this season, besides Tennessee, right? But for the most part, most quarterbacks who have been efficient have been able to do that against Alabama this season.
Yeah. And I think Alabama, and giving up those big plays, leaving guys on an island in the last few games, has coaxed a lot of quarterbacks into playing a different style of ball, thinking that they have that one-on-one shot. We've seen the safeties getting interceptions pretty consistently at Alabama over the last few games. Some disguised coverages where it looks one-on-one, then you have some safety help. In the last 3 games, I'm looking at a lot of recency in the breakdowns this week because teams have continued to adapt over the last 3 games, which we know South Carolina, in Tennessee, and then Missouri. Alabama's 4th in the country in interceptions in those games. You mentioned Nussmeier's struggles. They're bottom 20 in the country in throwing picks. So Nussmeier is going to air the ball out. It's going to be up to Alabama to disguise those coverages and make those plays to pick that off. One guy's going to win in that, either the Alabama defense or Nussmeier throwing the deep ball. If Alabama picks off one of those, 2 of those, Nussmeier's prone to throwing picks. It's the truth. Alabama's prone to getting them. So I think in a shootout, yes. Now LSU's DBs on the flip side of this have been giving up plays as well. I think that if you give Milroe, who is good at when he's moving around and he's not following his fundamentals, he's throwing inaccurate balls. But when he's hitting Ryan Williams, 20, 30, 40 yards downfield, he's hitting them. And there's going to be plays where he's testing LSU DBs as well, even though they're going to be running a lot.
Absolutely. And there's definitely going to be plays for where Milroe can test these DBs. A lot of teams, you talked about it earlier, have not had an answer for this 3-headed running attack, right? It feels like once Bama's able to get in the red zone, the planned run is coming from Milroe on the left or the right side, but you can't stop it.
Yeah. It does feel pretty like clockwork. Like we get there and, here's going to go. they got an attack back there. They got some dogs.
They definitely got some dogs back there. And so final predictions on this game, it's going to be a super hype game. I like LSU at home. I think the last time they played at home, they won this game, if I'm not mistaken. I like LSU at home 28-21.
Okay. I like Alabama in this game. I think it's going to come strictly down to third downs. Alabama's defense is near the top 20 in the country on third down defense. They're 18th in the country. LSU 9th in the country on third down conversion rates. If Alabama can get off the field, I think they win this game. I think Alabama's surging and improving. I like Alabama to win this one 31-27, find themselves in a good spot to get to the playoffs on the season. And, it's coming from an Alabama fan, so roll Tide. I hope I see it from the boys there, but could be a big day for Nussmeier airing it out.
Yeah. Hey, look, his jersey's going to be white. He barely gets sacked. He's going to be clean. He's going to be throwing that thing in the pocket. Kyron Lace is going to be hitting the gun celebration. It's going to be a whole lot of fun going on in Baton Rouge and at Tigerland. So, I like LSU in this one. Georgia, Ole Miss, big time game. Jackson Dart, Carson Beck. Who do we like in this game?
I mean, Georgia 2.5-point favorites, but this is one, like I mentioned early in the episode, circled on the calendar. Ole Miss is surging. They both won last week. If you look at the Georgia win, you look at the Ole Miss win on paper, yeah, Ole Miss looked like they smoked them, but I think from a true ball standpoint, like Georgia's win was not very impressive. And Ole Miss's was extremely impressive against the Arkansas team that me and you have continued to tout this year as better than paper would tell you. Ole Miss took what they wanted. I said it in our reaction to the game. They took exactly what they wanted. If they wanted a sack, they went and got it. If they wanted a safety, they got it. If they wanted a deep ball, they got it. Georgia's a team that can get got right now. And that's where I sit in this game.
Okay. All right. I like it. And so for Georgia, a lot of people feel like they can get got, and we've seen it, right? We've seen it just even in games that they've won close. Kentucky was a close game. They dominated in Texas. And so it sometimes it makes me feel like with Georgia, it's when it comes to big games, they show up. We didn't see it in the first half against Bama, but they came back. Of course, he made it a close game. Texas, everybody was saying Texas was the team. Georgia showed that they're the team again. I just think this team plays up and down to the competition. That doesn't mean that they're going to play up again, but it to me, it shows me that they know how to play up at least. And, I feel like I've seen this story year in and year out, right? Ole Miss looks good, and then Ole Miss can't beat Georgia. Tennessee will look good, and then all of a sudden it's like Georgia beats them. I think that if there's any game that Carson Beck is going to clean up his turnovers, this could be the game, right? Okay. It just seems like it would be time.
Okay. From a timing standpoint, I'm with you. I think that they have everything in grasp to improve and be a better team. Do I think it's this game? I do not. I think that Ole Miss right now is going to put insane pressure on this Georgia offense. Right now they're leading the SEC in sacks, and it's not even close. 42 sacks on the year. Next up is 31. They swarmed Taylor Green. They swarmed Malachi Singleton last week. There was no room for anyone to operate. And right now we know that Carson Beck in the interceptions battles that he's had, leads, right there in the SEC and fifth in the country in sacks, interceptions thrown. So it's not even an SEC problem. I mean, he is one of the most proficient quarterbacks in the country in throwing interceptions.
Yeah.
And we've seen it last week where it was clean pockets. I mean, he's just not reading the play right. Like, he's not seeing underneath zones. He's throwing the ball to guys who are clearly not open, but he's doing it with a clean pocket. So when you're in a game like this and Ole Miss is attacking, I don't think that paints him to have a good day.
Yeah, and so for them, they're going to have to really clean that up as we've talked about. And I agree with you. A lot of these interceptions have been clean pocket interceptions. For Ole Miss, this is kind of the game they built this roster for. That the defensive line we kind of talked about a little bit with the amount of sacks and pressure they create. Walter Nolan's been really dominant this season. For Ole Miss offensively, do you think that they're going to be able to take it to this team? Defensively for Georgia, right? Georgia, we always talk about having a top pass defense. We saw what they were able to do having their way without Trey Harris last week. Watkins was their top receiver, but Trey Harris didn't even play in the game, and they still were able to dominate. And of course, everyone should know this. Trey Harris is one of the best receivers in the country, statistically. And so, potentially having him back this game, saw what they were able to do last game, it makes me feel like this could be Dart's moment.
Yeah.
This could be his game.
Yeah. I mean, right now, all-time offensive leader at Ole Miss after this last game. Jordan Watkins, I mean, he did his thing without Trey Harris. Should Trey Harris not even be able to go in this game, I still think that there's potential for Ole Miss to continue to take the deep shot, the big play. It's worked all year. It worked behind play action early on. They've continued to have great route combinations. We know Lane Kiffin in his aptitude for drawing up plays that get guys open and get playmakers in space, and they're doing that here. Now, Georgia is not going to be as easy to do that against as Arkansas. So do I think they score 60-plus points? I do not think so. But right now, it's hard to doubt that they could get that going against this team because you saw Lagway with the deep ball last week. Like, he was able to do it. They were able to score with Aiden Warner, getting Badger the ball on some bigger plays. I think that Ole Miss can keep it together. Now, we've seen Ole Miss, though, struggle in the same light. So I think that Ole Miss, if they can get the running game going with Henry Parrish, then yes, it increases their chance of taking those offensive shots like they want.
Yeah, and Ole Miss has definitely been trending upwards, right? Since their first couple games against South Carolina and Kentucky, they've been certainly trending upwards. Obviously the loss against LSU. Who do you think this game is more important for? Both teams have a loss on their resume. Which team do you think needs this more?
I think going into the season, the expectations were higher for Georgia. From a resume standpoint, I think that Georgia. I think if Georgia loses this game, their season's not done. If Ole Miss loses this game, it's in a tough spot. Now, Georgia, this isn't it. Like, you have Tennessee still. Like, you're not. This isn't the last test for you.
Right.
I would say that Ole Miss needs this more, though. I mean, they're going to be at home. This is one that Ole Miss really, really wants. They see it in their sights, especially after that last game. The momentum is high.
Definitely.
What do you think?
I'm in agreement with you, right? I think Ole Miss, this game is crucial, just given that they don't have a Tennessee type team on their resume for the remainder of the season. This is the toughest opponent they have on their schedule on paper, and in reality as well. This is way more critical for them. I think if Georgia was to lose this game, they can afford to beat Tennessee and find themselves in that 12-team discussion, or at least first four in the bubble watch. Trying to buy in again in that first 12.
Yeah. So for Georgia to win this game, what do you think the key for them here is?
Yeah, I think the key for Georgia to win this game is to not allow this Ole Miss offense to just have their way, like you mentioned earlier, right? Like, I think Georgia will be able to score. I think the defense will do enough to stop them. But if it's just going to be an all-out offensive front, the one time we've seen that this season, Georgia had a hard time coming back from it, right? When Alabama was able to get up that 35 nothing lead, that was what made it tough for this offense to come back, and having to play from behind is not a spot that Carson Beck has traditionally been in. We've only really seen it against Bama. We've seen it a little bit against Kentucky, and we saw it last year against Georgia Tech. So that, to me, is a key for Ole Miss to win this game, is to really get the offense going early. And for Georgia to win this game is not allow the Ole Miss offense to get some momentum. The defense will be able to hang. It's the offense being able to score on Georgia's defense. That's always been their kryptonite in the past in this game.
Yeah. I mean, I think for Georgia, the O-line, you have Tate Ratledge back. If the O-line can protect him, hopefully he's reading the zones properly. He's going to make better clean pocket reads. Don't let Ole Miss, rack up the sacks, put pressure on him, because you're not doing him any favors. I think that's the key for Georgia in this game. I think right now Ole Miss is swarming too hard. I think they're getting to quarterbacks too often. In this game, I like Ole Miss winning at home 27-20.
Okay. I think we're in the same boat here. I like Ole Miss as well, 28-23 in this game. I think they find a way to pull it out. I think it is a very close game going into the half and going to the end of the game. A game that feels like it should be on SEC on CBS, but it'll be a great broadcast for ESPN as well. So, like I said, I like Ole Miss 28-23 in this one.
Mississippi State versus Tennessee this week. Tennessee big favorites at home, 24 points. Tennessee trying to get everything together for the year. They're eyeing the playoffs. They want to be there in that spot. They got Mississippi State, and right now they're not necessarily anyone to sleep on. The offense behind Michael Van Buren has been performing better and better every week. Do you feel like Tennessee is a 24-point favorite in this game? Do they look strongly to you as a winner in this one?
I think that Tennessee has a great shot to cover this 24-point spread if the defense is able to create touchdowns off of turnovers. Just given what we've seen from this offense, improved performance last week, still shown to be stoppable, but improved performance with, their rushing game. Dylan Sampson having two touchdowns. Nico is able to have a efficient game, one touchdown in the air. I don't feel super confident on the 24-point spread. And it's because on the other side, you got Michael Van Buren, absolute dog, true freshman. He's shown a lot in these past couple games, being able to score on some of these opponents, getting a lot of his receivers involved. Johnny Daniels has been looking impressive on the ground as well. So Tennessee 24-point spread, it feels kind of high. I could see that number going down as we get closer to Saturday.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think Mississippi State has been this team, I think, over the season where they've, since Van Buren's been quarterback, where they find themselves late in games, like a couple touchdowns back, but still keeping up and trying to attack to get themselves back in games, which is where I think this big spread is finding itself. Mississippi State's defense is not good. We talked about it before this. We know the issues
second
there.
To last in the SEC in passing yards per game.
Yeah, so that's a good point there. And with Tennessee, we've talked about Nico's struggles at times in finding his guys. He's continuing to improve week over week. Could this be the game where he gets really back on track, finds his guys, and they build this connection that lasts for the rest of the season?
Yeah, I feel like Mississippi State's kind of been that game for quarterbacks this season to kind of get on track. Even we talked about Georgia playing them. Carson Beck had a couple turnovers, but he also had a 3-touchdown performance, right? Arkansas, 6 touchdowns from Taylor Green this past 2 weeks ago. This could be that game for Nico. He has cleaned up the turnover challenges. Now it's just getting the ball to the players in the right spots, because the coaching is getting these players open. It's not like these guys can't create separation. It's just continuing to be more efficient. And he's a young guy, right? First year starter, true sophomore. I think this could be that game for him. It's a good low pressure situation. Obviously, you don't want to find yourself in a close rubber match. You don't want people having to flip onto this game and see what's going on for Tennessee. But Mississippi State, they've kind of, like you said, they've been that team just hanging around. A lot of teams haven't been able to put them fully away, but a lot of times they get in their own way. We saw that against UMass, letting UMass get a lead early in the game. They're not mistake free, but they're not also a full liability. There is enough players on this team offensively to keep them in games.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm not putting Mississippi State and Florida in the same bucket right now, but Florida took this Tennessee team to overtime at Tennessee. I don't think that playing in Neyland is the end-all be-all and you don't have a shot. I don't think that Mississippi State is Florida, is not what I'm saying. But what would Mississippi State need to do in this game, either defensively or offensively, to get to that point where it's late in the game and we're like, okay, they have a shot?
Yeah. I think going off of what we've seen them do well this season versus to what we have not seen them do well, the main crux has been the defense all season. So the key to them for this game is going to be making big stops when it matters, not giving up the big play. Nico has shown to make plays, but they've been more big plays. He hasn't been as efficient when it comes to intermediate routes, some of those lower yard routes. If they're giving up plays in the lower and the intermediate passing game, creates yak, that's not going to be a good formula for them to win this game. Offensively, I would expect, the offense to be able to score 14-21. You talked about it with Tennessee. They haven't really scored over 24 points since the beginning of the season, when we're talking like they're playing NC State. NC State's quarterback retired, right? These are completely different teams now. Yeah. So if this team can hold Tennessee to 24, there's a possibility Mississippi State could be around. I don't know if they have the guts and the will and the know-how to win a game like that. If it was a close rubber match, I think a team like a LSU or even a Kentucky knows how to win that game. But I think Mississippi State's able to keep it, has the ability to keep it close like that. And the key is going to be stopping the short and mid-range passing, which has been a challenge for Tennessee in a couple games past.
Yeah. So if looking at this game, it's more like Mississippi State has a good chance to cover the spread and find themselves like playing that kind of game at the end.
Yeah.
I'm with you. I mean, where the team has been, Tennessee playing NC State, Chattanooga, Kent State, like they've only scored over 24 points twice since then, a 25 and a 28-point game. Now expecting them to win by 24. I think it's a big shot to Mississippi State. I think Mississippi State could cover in this one. So what's your score prediction here?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, you cut that out. So my score prediction in this game, I think that Tennessee's able to win 35-21. I don't think it's going to be a 24-point spread. I think that they do eclipse that 24 plus points, total offensively that they've done twice since the beginning of the season. I do think Mississippi State's able to score, but 35-21 in this game. Volunteers. Oklahoma versus Missouri. 7:45 p.m. 1.5-point spread. Missouri is favored. This game is taking place in Missouri. SEC Network, the official network of the Missouri Tigers. Headlines and stories for this game for you, Hunter.
I think right now it's unfortunate that both teams find themselves disappointed right now in the season. And Missouri's only 6-2. It's a sad 6-2. It's not meeting the expectations for the year. The 2 losses coming at a 65-point margin. Oklahoma, we know the struggles that they've had there, switching up the quarterback, now going back to Jackson Arnold. I think a win in this game for either team is crucial to the momentum for the rest of the season. And I hate talking about this in a team that if Oklahoma wins, both teams are bowl eligible.
Yeah.
This is maybe Oklahoma's last shot for bowl eligibility with Alabama and LSU next after this. They could win either of those games. But right now, it's 2 teams fighting for a win that both of them have marked on their calendar as a win, like a game that both teams are like, all right, at this point in the season, this is the game that we need to win and should win. So it's both teams fighting back from a disappointment a little bit.
Yeah, definitely both teams fighting back from disappointment from their own expectations, right? You talked about both teams, one team being in a bowling position, other team being looking to be bowl eligible. That's not the expectations of Oklahoma as a program, and that wasn't the expectations for Missouri for this particular season, right? I think in other seasons, being bowl eligible would be a good expectation. It's a renewed Big 12 rivalry, and it feels like for this game to me, it means a lot more for Oklahoma to be able to, in some ways pull off an upset against Missouri. For Missouri, it's more of who do we think we are? And let's show the country we are who we think we are, right? We haven't been able to do that against A&M. Weren't able to do that against Alabama, but they have been able to do it against Vandy, against other opponents. And so this game, it presents a good opportunity for Missouri. Major keys for them when it comes to slowing down Jackson Arnold.
Yeah, I think right now that Oklahoma has relied on the rush a little bit. We saw Javonte Barnes get going last week, and that was against Maine. So, take it into consideration. But if Missouri's defense is able to slow down the rush and force them to pass, and when I'm saying stop the rush, I even mean Jackson Arnold on the ground, forcing them into pass, then you have a better shot in this game. I mean, Alabama was able to run against Missouri. You don't want to see Oklahoma in the same way. Force them to pass if you're Missouri. On the flip side of the ball, if you're Missouri offense, you got playmakers, because I have yet to see a confident take on the quarterback for this game. If it's going to be Cook, if it's going to be Pine, if it's going to be anybody else, like whoever they might want to throw out there to get it done. You got to get your playmakers. Don't try to do too much. Let the guys I've said it before, get it into their hands, let them make a play. I trust Burden, I trust Weiss with the ball before I trust Cook or Pine with it, trying to be the guy, especially not 100% Cook.
Yep, absolutely. I'm right there with you. And I think, getting Burden the ball and reverse sweeps could always be a good look. I feel like their game is similar. I talk a lot about, Kentucky and Barry and Brown, just similar receiver, speed guy, likes to create plays of separation. Both guys return punts and return kicks. Get him the ball, in any way possible. For Weiss, more targets coming his way. We haven't seen that much of a difference in the performance between Drew Pine and Brady Cook. Brady Cook looks like slightly better, but ideally you want to roll in this game. And I'm sure he wants to play with only, three games left in his career for college football before bowl season.
Yeah. And the expectation is that he'll be back, but they haven't said when that will be. I imagine that we will see him out there. I'm planning my predictions and any sort of betting that he will be out there. Will he be 100%? Probably not, but he'll do his best to play it. I think it could look like Alabama, where he's going to be in limited fashion. So the playmakers are going to be important. Letting them be the one to make the plays. Oklahoma doesn't have that luxury. I think it is more in the quarterback's hands on what you need to do. It's running the ball. It's getting into making the right read with your back. But Oklahoma defense, you got to bring pressure and try to throw off the quarterback situation, whether that's Cook or Pine.
Yeah, Missouri's defense would love to have a repeat performance of what South Carolina was able to do against this Oklahoma offensive line. They obviously don't have the same hosses up front like South Carolina does. Any other keys that you'd mentioned for Missouri's defense against this offense?
I mean, again, it's pressure, stopping the run, forcing them to pass. We know the wide receiver struggles that Oklahoma is having at fielding that position. And if you can force them into that and trying to get those guys open, we've seen the lack of separation coming from Oklahoma receivers. That could put you in a good spot from a Missouri defensive standpoint. I think we see both offenses really trying to struggle their way through piecing the drive together. Like,
it's interesting because I felt like the 42.5 point spread seemed low. You're saying it almost, I'm putting words in your mouth, but do you feel like it's appropriate, or do you think it's a little bit lower than where it should be?
I think it's extremely appropriate. I think it's going to be under. I think it's going to be under considerably. I think both teams will be really struggling to get something going, and it's going to come with weird plays. It's going to come with broken tackles. I think it's going to come with scrambling from Arnold. So yes, I mean, I'll tell you where I think it sits at. I think my prediction on the game is 17-13, Oklahoma winning.
Okay.
So I got it right around 30 points. I think that Missouri right now should Cook with Cook's not 100%. We saw with the Alabama game. I don't think that Oklahoma is Alabama, but I don't trust the Missouri team offensively to score with anybody but Cook at quarterback. And it's not even really like I felt that confident with Cook at quarterback. So
exactly.
That doesn't say much. So Oklahoma, I don't think that they have the aptitude to score as well.
Right. Absolutely. And I'm right there with you, right? I think it's an appropriate, over under score, 42.5. I could definitely see that. This Oklahoma offense did show some more prowess against Ole Miss a couple weeks back. The main game is the main game. It's obviously a G5 opponent. It might even be FCS, actually. The shout out to the Black Bears out of Maine. But before that, Oklahoma was able to score on Ole Miss. So it makes me think there is a possibility that they can score on this Missouri team. We've seen this Missouri team give up points to multiple opponents this season, like A&M, like Vanderbilt. Oklahoma's not any of those teams, but it's a possibility. So you gave your final prediction. Any final thoughts on this game? Leaving it to just the casual viewer or the sports bettor.
Yeah, I would like to see the team who wins this game. I think the team that wins this game would be the one that gets their running back going. I think Javonte Barnes has the potential. I'm not sure the status on Nate Noel. I was trying to dig and figure out what was going on there. Marcus Carroll then in his place is also exceptional. I think whichever one of these can get the running back going could relieve the pressure from an otherwise ugly game.
Yep. I'm right there with you. I definitely see that. And so, that kind of wraps up our game previews around the country. Looking at some of the other games this week means even more with the college football playoff rankings coming out on Tuesday. As they always say, the rankings are not set in stone. So just because you're sitting at 4 or 2 in 1 week does not mean you cannot move down or up the next week, despite winning all your games. What are some games that stand out to you when looking at the rest of the slate of college football this weekend?
Colorado, Texas Tech. I think that's up there for a very good reason. Texas Tech already on their spoiler tour, with their game last week against Iowa State. Now you get Colorado, very small favorites, 3.5. They're finding their way moving up in the rankings. I think that Colorado has a great shot at getting to the playoff, especially if they win the Big 12.
Yeah.
This game would be a critical loss for Colorado if they can't pull this one out.
Yeah. And, the Big 12, I'm sure would love to have a big brand like this, from an eyeball standpoint. I mean, we see the clicks and the views that Colorado gets. Texas Tech started the season off with pretty high expectations. I think they're only sitting at about 2 or 3 losses right now. We saw what they did last week against Iowa State. They have a really good shot to upset in this game, like you mentioned. It's going to be in Lubbock as well. Big noon's going there. Shout out to your guy, Mark Ingram, on the cast over there.
Yeah.
So big trust. But another game I'm excited about for this weekend is Indiana, Michigan.
Okay.
Indiana is sitting at number 8 in the nation right now in the AP. Really curious to see what they do in terms of the CFP rankings. I think for a lot of sports bettors, this team has been winning most games by over 14 points. I think Vegas is starting to figure out what they're able to do, and right now that the spread is 14 points.
Yeah, and if I'm a Big Ten office guy, like I might almost want Indiana to lose because we're keeping a. I don't think that Indiana is better than um,
Ohio
Ohio
State
State.
or Ohio
I don't
State,
think
yeah.
that I don't necessarily know that they're better than Penn State. I think they're probably in the same caliber. But one of these, if Oregon continues to play to their potential, and Indiana wins out, you're going to see Ohio State miss the Big Ten championship. And so it'd be interesting to see if Indiana can continue to win out because of the way that it's set up. Like they will be in that game.
Yeah, and to Indiana's defense, right? Ohio State's on the schedule here in a week or two. So if
Oh,
Ohio
true.
State wants that spot, they got to win that game,
No,
right?
good call. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, but it's fair though. I think there is the aspect of entertainment when it comes to these rankings. If you don't think so, I think you're naive. I think there are certain brands that the committee wants to see, right? But for Indiana, it's interesting. It's always fun to see who can crash the party. Typically, even in the Big Ten, when Iowa's been good, but they haven't had a lot of offense, the committee still allowed Iowa to get in that top 4 before, or allowed them to be in that top 6 or 8. Well, I'm just curious what they'll do with this brand. You got Penn State taking on Washington. Washington beat USC last week. The USC is down bad. People are saying that Lincoln Riley's been able to manage to steal $100 million between two programs in the last 4 years. But for Penn State, they're looking to rebound and win in this game as a 13-point favorite in the Big Ten. So it'll be interesting.
Yeah, he'll develop a quarterback, not a program. But yeah, I mean, I'm looking at Iowa State, Kansas. I think that if Iowa State, where the AP poll has them, I'm very interested to see where on Tuesday they come into the playoff rankings, where they put this one-loss team with a maybe not so impressive resume. If Iowa State loses this game, it clears up any confusion when it comes to the final rankings.
Yeah.
It's 2-6 Kansas, and it's only a 3-point spread. So like
Kansas gave Kansas State a game. Kansas
Yeah.
State obviously lost last week to Houston. I think Kansas could easily get this upset. Not easily,
Yeah.
but like they could win this game. I wouldn't be that surprised, honestly.
Yeah. I mean, Iowa State, product of scheduling, like they're at 7-1, but it's for a multitude of reasons. I don't think that they belong in the conversation. So this would be one to kind of knock that back where that's not even really a concern.
Yeah, it's definitely a possibility. If you're playing winning football, I think they deserve to be part of the conversation. Has it been complete domination every game? No, but 7-1 is 7-1. I don't know. I don't think Iowa State plays Colorado this year. I would love to see that matchup. I think Colorado is a little more talented than Iowa State personally. I feel like every year that Iowa State's debating on if they want to let go their coach or not, but this year they're pretty good. In the ACC, I feel like ESPN always led headlines the ACC slate with a noon game. Miami's taking on Georgia Tech. It's right here in my backyard in Atlanta. So that game, 11-point spread for Miami, could be upset watch for the Canes taking on the Yellow Jackets.
They'll be playing kind of mid-tier football. They'll be in a close game until like midway through the third, early fourth. They're going to get a good touchdown to take a lead. They'll get a garbage time touchdown, and they'll win by 2 scores. Miami recipe.
Yeah, that's what they do. It is what they do, right? I think it'd be more interesting to pick the spreads from the first half to the second half, right? The first half point total, the first half point spread difference, right, compared to the second half. I'm sure that is a much more competitive, betting perspective. Clemson taking on Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech had a lot of high expectations. This could be the final nail in the coffin for Clemson, or they can continue to win and need some other pieces to fall in place to find themselves in that ACC championship, where I think in a 1-game scenario they could beat certain teams. But do you think Virginia Tech has a chance in this game?
I think they do. I think Clemson is going to be a hard team to beat twice in a row. Like for them to drop 2 games in a row, I think that Virginia Tech has a great shot at it. Clemson now going on the road after a loss. It could go either way. I would like to see Virginia Tech win, where I had them to start the year. So
you hear that sandstorm playing, down in Blacksburg, Virginia. It's there's a little bit of home field advantage potentially there. So
there is for sure.
Yeah. So, and then, looking at the rest of the country, rounding it out, Notre Dame's taking on Florida State. It's a marquee game just from a brand awareness perspective, nothing really crazy. Boise State's playing UNLV. But the main games, the main course is always the SEC.
That's
home
right.
cooking in the good old Southeast. And so we're excited to, continue to watch these games. Any final thoughts from you, Hunter?
No, big week. Alabama, LSU. All eyes on it. Huge game. I'm pumped.
Yeah. Oh yeah, really big one. I'm pumped for that one. I'm pumped for Ole Miss, Georgia. It's gonna be a big one here where I live in Georgia. There's a lot of Ole Miss fans as well, so it's it'll be really fun. And South Carolina, Vandy, so many great games this week. And so thank you for tuning in. If you like content like this, game previews, game recaps, please subscribe, like, follow, comment. Let us know what you think about what we have to say, right or wrong. We could take it. I could take it to the chin. And so this was episode 22. Thank you for listening again. This is the new SEC podcast. I'm Randall Ledet Jr.
Hunter Zeisman. Catch you in the next one.
Catch you in the next one.